Washington Pod presents EARL Nightingale.
People often say, young people especially, I want to do something for the world. I want to be of service during my lifetime. It's long been my opinion that the best thing you can do for the world is to do the best thing you can do for you. Make out your want list. It's by getting what you most want that you will usually make your greatest contribution to society. We do that which we are motivated to do. The greater the motivation, the more we do. We're motivated most not by what we think we should be doing for the world, but rather by what we most want from the world. You know, Edison didn't invent the electric light for the good of humanity. He invented it because he wanted to more than anything else. That it's been a great boon to man and created one of the world's greatest industries are besides the point. The best preachers are those who enjoy being preachers, and it's the same with teachers, generals, businessmen, and wives and mothers. Those who make the greatest contribution and by so doing reap the greatest rewards are those who thoroughly enjoy what they're doing. The sourest, most miserable and unhappy people on earth are those in fields of service in which they find no deep and abiding joy. They've been punishing themselves for some imagined sin, and they look the part. They often do more harm than good. How many times have you wanted to say to someone, "Look, friend, if you don't like your work, why don't you quit? But don't take it out on me." So if you have your heart set on doing good for the world and or humanity, get into work for which you're best fitted, work you can thoroughly enjoy and throw yourself into 100%. A happy plumber makes a greater contribution to the world than a miserable university professor or an unhappy lawyer. Some of the world's greatest artists, people who have made tremendous contributions, were neurotic, unhappy people such as Edgar Allan Poe, Vincent van Gogh, Nietzsche, Wagner, and many others. But they had found their outlets. They had found the fields in which they wanted to work, had to work. Surely they would have been even more miserable had they not found their life's work. They would have been insufferable in any other. For some people, there's only one thing for them to do. I can't imagine a Picasso doing anything but drawing and painting pictures. But for most of the rest of us, there are undoubtedly many fields in which we can find deep satisfaction and reward. A fine business executive can be happy in any number of kinds of businesses, and in many different positions. Another man might be just as happy as a carpenter as he would be as an electrician. But when it comes to serving mankind or feeling guilty because you don't think you're doing enough, it's good to remember that we can usually serve the world best by working toward and achieving the goals we want most to reach. Millions of young people in high schools and colleges throughout the world ask themselves, how can I spend my life doing the most good? The best way is to spend your life doing that which you most want to do. In that way, everybody wins. Some time back, I made a talk to about 1,000 university students on the campus of a large, well-known American university. They were wonderfully behaved, laughed in all the right places, and were very receptive to what I had to say, for which I was indeed grateful. I noticed hundreds of them even taking notes. I was worried about that speech. I had heard so much about the generation gap and reports from young people that anyone over 30 had nothing to say to them that I approached that speech with the trepidation of a man approaching a man-eating tiger with a willow wand. But as I say, it went off fine, and I was very much relieved. And I'm sure one of the things that averted disaster was a comment I used of Scott Buchanan. Scott Buchanan was a great educator who died in 1968. But he'd said, "The powers of the mind are the powers of the man." And building the power of the mind is largely an after-school job. It's a spare-time job. This is why developing the powers of the mind are not necessarily dependent on a formal education. A good liberal education is the best start if you're lucky enough to get one. A good base of English, world history, world literature, and math are fundamental to developing the real powers of the mind, the very subject so many young people dread and work so hard to avoid. If you're interested in this subject, and you'd like to know more about Scott Buchanan and his ideas on education, there's a paperback published by the Center for the Study of Democratic Institutions in Santa Barbara, California, entitled Embers of the World. It's a series of conversations with Scott Buchanan after it became apparent that he did not have much longer to live. It's a published series of conversations between Scott Buchanan and Harris Wofford Jr., Stringfellow Barr, and others. The powers of the mind are the powers of the man. Once in a talk Buchanan delivered at St. John's College, he asked, "How are you doing? Do you believe in and trust your intellect, that innate power that never sleeps? You've lived a lot. You've fallen into the hands of scholars and into the grooves of practice. You've suffered the winds of doctrine and have gotten lost in the jungle of ideologies. Latterly, you've been stormed by scientific miracle. In all these learnings and practices, have you listened to the small, spontaneous voice within that asks continually if these things are true? Have you allowed this voice to speak louder and remind you that you do not know, that you know you do not know, that you know what you do not know? Do you believe that knowledge is possible, that truth is attainable, and that it's always your business to seek it, although evidence is overwhelmingly against it? Have you in the course of your life become your own teacher? Have you yet recognized that you are and always have been your own teacher? Liberal education has as its end the free mind, and the free mind must be its own teacher. Intellectual freedom begins when one says with Socrates that he knows nothing, and then goes on to add, I know what it is that I don't know. The powers of the mind are the powers of the man. Recent studies seem to indicate that the powers of the mind are infinite, rich, fertile land awaiting development. If you can think of something you want that is within the realm of human accomplishment, I can tell you how to get it. To do so, let me tell you a short story about what happened to a friend of mine. My friend is a multimillionaire, tears around the world in his private jet, and in general is keeping busy and having himself a pretty good time. Some years back, he was flat broke and a total failure. He was a failure as a husband, a father, a provider, and had the personality of a polecat. No friends, a complete and thoroughgoing bust. And one day he fell to wondering how people succeed in the world. Well, he had enough nerve to make an appointment with one of his city's most successful men, and during the interview asked him, How can I succeed? So the great man asked him what he wanted, and he rattled off a pretty good list of things he wanted, including a nice home, a lot more money than he was making, and so on. Well, many of them were the wrong things, you might say, but at that time of his life he still wasn't very smart. So the great and successful man gave him the secret key to all the abundance he could possibly want. And it was in this short sentence. He said, People have everything we want. People have everything we want. If all the people in this country gave you a nickel, you'd have $10 million. The people have everything you want. Your part of the bargain is to provide something for the people that they will buy in sufficient numbers to permit you to have what you want. Your part of the bargain is to be worthy of the price you set as your goal. Your job is to grow as a person to fill the shoes of the person you've decided to become. When you set a goal for yourself, you've established a self-fulfilling prophecy. A self-fulfilling prophecy, as S.I. Hayakawa has pointed out, is a statement that is neither true nor false, but is capable of becoming true if it is believed. Reaching your material goals will not mean that you're a nice guy, or that your wife and kids will like you, or that you'll be popular or intelligent or interesting. But you'll have that house and that money and anything else you want that money can buy, and if you're really smart, you'll develop at the same time the things that money cannot buy, things like humility, love of your fellow man, and that includes the wife and kids and the neighbors and so on. But as I said in the beginning, if you can think of something you want that is within the realm of human accomplishment, I can tell you how to get it. First, decide definitely upon what it is you want. With that fixed in your mind, you must then come up with the plan for providing something from within yourself, your mind and body, that will be valuable enough to people so that they'll give you what you want in return for it. They'll pay you any price. But the requirement remains the same. Your part of the bargain is to fulfill the other part. It's not particularly easy, nor is it particularly difficult. It simply must be done. How are you doing in the idea department? Do you have an idea file, a place to keep your ideas? When's the last time you wrote down a good idea? It doesn't have to be a new idea, you know. Just a little better.